Bulavanaka, welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Rita Narayan, and today we're talking about new provisions in the law that enable relevant authorities to tackle organized crime and tax evasion. In the studio with me is Mr. Jitoko Tikolevu, Chief Executive of the Fiji Revenue Customs Authority, and Mr. Razim Buksh, Director of the Financial Intelligence Unit. Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking time off. I know you have very busy schedules and taking time to come in to be able to participate in this program, Speak Your Mind. As I mentioned earlier, we are talking about these new provisions in the law that enable you to look at organized crime and tax evasion. Firstly, gentlemen, what does the Proceeds of Crime Amendment Decree 2012 cover? Mr. Buksh?
This is the second time that we have amended the Proceeds of Crime Act in Fiji. The first one being in 2005. The 2012 amendments incorporates newer provisions on unexplained wealth, and it defines what unexplained wealth is and the mechanisms that go with it, such as who makes the applications, what constitutes unexplained wealth, and what would be some of the mechanisms in exercising those provisions and implementing those provisions. So all in all, it modernizes the provisions that is now at the disposal of the relevant law enforcement agencies to look at organized crime, to look at tax evasion, to look at financial fraud and other similar criminal activities in Fiji.
And what are some of these authorities or institutions that are? What are these institutions that are looking at these at this whole issue that is covered in this amendment decree?
The Proceeds of Crime Act ropes in a number of institutions in Fiji, and namely the most relevant law enforcement agency or authority in Fiji is the Fiji Police Force, that is empowered to exercise not just investigation of predicate crimes or money laundering crimes, but also to exercise additional powers on search warrants and possession of properties that is suspected to be linked with tainted assets. My colleague will explain how it impacts on tax evasion. But the other important stakeholder in the process and under the Proceeds of Crime Act is the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, who makes a number of applications before the court so that the ingredients and the objectives of the law are exercised by the Office of the DPP in securing first a conviction for a crime, as well as getting restraining and forfeiture of properties that are identified by the relevant law enforcement agencies.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Jitoko Tikolevu, why was there a need to bring in this new legislation or this amendment to this decree?
Anyway, thank you for that. For us at Fiji Revenue Customs Authority, this major amendment to the decree really will help us in terms of our work. Firstly, in terms of combating, by and large, the unexplained wealth. For us, in terms of tax evasion, we have our provisions in our legislations in terms of tax avoidance, tax evasion, which perhaps is not addressing really the detailed schemes that are put in place by taxpayers or those that continue to defraud government of revenue. As you know, in terms of our legislation changes, we also brought in place an amendment to our income tax legislation, which also requires the taxpayer to explain unexplained deposits. So it's very much, by and large, consistent with this intention of taxpayers to explain the wealth that is unexplained as well. But for us, the continued battle that we should discourage taxpayers from taking steps and in putting in place schemes that will defraud government, it's a big help for us, and we will work consistently, work closely with other enforcement agencies in these places, police, DPP, and FIU in terms of exchange of information. So by and large, it's just the compliance. This will really help our work in terms of encouraging voluntary compliance from taxpayers. So what are we saying? What are we saying? because of this provision as well as our own amendment in our income tax decree, there's no more of that. The provisions are there to discourage people from doing wrong things. Please do the right thing, which means that you should lodge your returns at the right time, and importantly, you must pay the right amount of tax. This is what it's all about.
Now, the assets, what would come under this classification of assets? I mean, you're talking about bank accounts, land, properties. What sort of things are we looking at?
Okay, before Razim comment on that, I'll just start off. For us, it's the bank account. As you know, a major exercise that we've done in the past 2 or 3 years is the TIN registration. So some of these amendments just complement that. So the TIN registration actually requires everyone, whether it's a child or grandmother. I'm putting money in my grandmother or my uncle's account. It gives access to us, and the type of practices that taxpayers are doing in hiding their money away to the relatives. So that when it requires the taxpayer now, because given that we have all the information of a particular person in terms of taxpayer, we'll be able to relate very accurately someone's earning capacity, his income that has not been declared in his tax return. And of course, bank deposits is a bank account. Anyone that wants to open bank account must have a TIN. So for us, it's a bank account. But the asset side of things, other than the bank account, I will leave it to Razim to explain.
Mr. Buksh?
Yeah, thank you. The Proceeds of Crime Act very broadly defines what a property is and what constitutes property. And it includes money, funds, real, including cash, money in transit, funds or in interest held in shares. It includes real estate properties, investable properties. It includes motor vehicles. It includes bearer securities, negotiable documents. So it also extends to properties in Fiji and properties outside of Fiji.
So it's pretty extensive.
It is, and the nature of organized crime suggests and we have indicators and modern typologies that criminals are smarter these days, so they don't store wealth just at one place. So they spread their wealth, and I think the law must be modern enough to accommodate all types of property and wealth.
Thank you, gentlemen. You're on Speak Your Mind right now, and I'm Rita Narayan, and in studio with me is Mr. Jitoko Tikolevu, Chief Executive of FRCA, and Mr. Razim Buksh, Director of the Financial Intelligence Unit. And if you have any questions for either Mr. Tikolevu or Mr. Buksh regarding the new unexplained wealth provisions, you can email to goldfm@fbc.com.fj or find us on Gold FM Fiji on Facebook, and you can also call us on 3220-906 or 3220-907, and we will take a short break and we will come back to carry on with these discussions. Welcome back. You're on Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, and we have in studio this afternoon Mr. Jitoko Tikolevu, Chief Executive of FRCA, and Mr. Razim Buksh, Director of the Financial Intelligence Unit, and we're talking about the new unexplained wealth provisions in law. And if you have any questions for either of the gentlemen, you can email them to goldfm@fbc.com.fj or find us on Gold FM Fiji on Facebook. And you can also call us on 3220-906 or 3220-907, and hopefully the gentleman will be able to answer your questions, or we could also forward your questions to them later on if you're not able to send them in time. Now, Mr. Buksh, if we could just go back to the decree and talk about the processes that are involved in this.
Firstly, a person will be brought, or an organization or entity or a company or business will be brought to the attention of the relevant agencies that this particular individual or business is suspected to be in possession of unexplained wealth. then the process will be activated either through the initiative of the Financial Intelligence Unit or through the initiative of the other agencies such as the Revenue and Customs Authority or the police force. So a formal investigation process will take place, and that investigation will identify the person's background or the business's background as to what would be the normal or ordinary legitimate wealth or revenue or income of that particular person. And then we will look at all the assets and wealth of that particular individual or business. And we will also look at the wealth that or the assets or funds that has been spent or spent on living, including a very high standard of living. And that includes a variety of expenditures such as frequenting overseas or having possession of a very high lifestyle. So the investigation process is the most difficult one for the authorities to identify the relevant wealth that we suspect is unexplained. But we don't have to undertake or associate that wealth with any criminal activity. So the whole intention and idea of the new decree is that it will cut short a number of processes. Traditionally, the authorities, in particular the police, would have to link the property with a criminal activity. Now that process is cut short. So the next step will be we will then put all this information before the DPP, and the DPP, when he is satisfied that there is a case that can proceed, he will make an application before the court, the High Court, and then there will be a declaration made by the court that this person has in possession unexplained wealth, and a declaration will be made. And after that, the DPP will apply for a order that will allow the authorities to confiscate, forfeit that, or the order will say that that individual business must pay to the state the amount of unexplained wealth. So that is the process that we have under the amended decree.
And are there any cases being investigated right now?
We have currently few cases that is subject to our monitoring and investigation, although a formal investigation has not started yet. But there's one case that, if I may discuss here, is a person is suspected currently to be involved in drug trafficking. And this is the amount of wealth that we suspect he currently possesses: 5 motor vehicles, of which 2 are very heavy machines. He is a director and shareholder of 5 businesses. He holds 10 bank accounts. He has paid off numerous loan accounts with cash, and he has a large cash balance at the bank account, and he has conducted numerous large transactions. So this is one case that we are currently thinking of pursuing because of the high value of unexplained wealth that we suspect is under his control and under his possession. After this, the case will be formally investigated, and it is up to the Director of Public Prosecution to make the application before the court. And the court, when it is satisfied that yes, this particular person does possess unexplained wealth, then a declaration will be made, and an order will be made for him to pay to the state the amount of unexplained wealth, which can run into millions of dollars for this particular case.
Right. So besides the 3 institutions, FRCA, FIU, police, there are other stakeholders that need to be vigilant to be able to pick up on these. You know, with this, certainly the alarm bells would have been ringing when these transactions were apparently being made.
Yes.
How are you working right across the system through, to
yes,
get this?
You're absolutely right, Rita. I mean, we have a number of ongoing mechanisms that we have, and given the complexity involved in the whole scheme and framework, the agencies need to be very closely networked, and the FIU has very strong networking with relevant agencies such as the Revenue and Customs, the Police, Immigration Department, Ministry of Justice. FICAC, Land Transport Authority, and others. So it allows us to share resources, exchange information and intelligence. So the information that is held currently with the Financial Intelligence Unit is basically useless if it is not shared for a specific purpose. And therefore, all these agencies need to be consulted and roped in to conduct a very thorough investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Buksh. Mr. Tikolevu, if I may ask you a question with regards to tax evasion, what are some of the major issues that you've picked up on in as far as tax evasion is concerned in the last couple of years?
Yeah, and trying to combat tax evasion is a big battle for us. It's not only about taxation provisions in our legislation, but it's also more about the skills of our own people that need to understand the schemes, steps that has been a series of steps that has been undertaken, and add to that the transfer pricing is also adding to that. Very recently, we've been hearing about the global problem tax evasion is brought about to tax administrations globally, and that is it's a global phenomena. Difficulties faced by tax administrations and governments alike, whereby the battle continues. Multinational companies, through their transactions with related parties, cannot be detected. The EU last week announced that them to combine, they'll be formalizing a regulation. It will be enacted to combat tax evasion. They realize how difficult it is to combat tax evasion. As well as currently now we can see in the news the software on email company that has been in the US that has been taken to task by the government for tax evasion, minimizing the tax paid by each related parties offshore in US, in Europe, and in France and the like. So it's really a problem for us. But coming back to Fiji, in the past we have some big cases has already been finalized. As you know, tax evasion is illegal. Tax avoidance is legal, whereby tax planners, they do take steps and advise clients on the various steps they need to do to minimize tax. I mean, take advantage of the incentives and concessions that are there in a particular country. But it ranges. The range of steps that are undertaken by companies, multinational companies, to evade taxes is phenomenal. It can tax haven being brought into the picture here, whereby they put a branch or subsidiary company in a tax haven. Company set up in Fiji, the parent company in Australia, but there's a conduit company that's been formed in a tax haven, either in Vanuatu, for example, so that all the remittance from here, the profits, sent to Vanuatu within Australia. So it's just a company that has been formed, a paper company, for the purpose of taking advantage of the low tax or tax-free in Vanuatu. Such is the problem we're facing. But legislation provisions alone is not suffice to battle this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tikolevu. We'll just take a short break and we'll come back to that discussion on tax evasion. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. I'm Rita Narayan, and in studio today we have Mr. Jitoko Tikolevu, Chief Executive of FRCA, and Mr. Razim Buksh, Director of the Financial Intelligence Unit, and we're talking about unexplained wealth and the new provisions in law. Now, Mr. Tikolevu, before we went to the break, you were talking about tax evasion. What is the extent of tax evasion in the country right now?
Yeah, I think it was in the media this week that combined tax evasion with the underground economy, cash economy and all that, we're looking at the vicinity of 300 million. But tax evasion alone, given the past cases we've handled, we're confining ourselves around 30 to 40 million. This is just based on some of the cases we've gone through, taking an average from that. But we are quite adamant that the quantum of this is still huge. That is just based on some of the cases we've successfully resolved with taxpayers, those that have gone to court. The challenge for us is to continue to keep our team. We've just formed our transfer pricing team just last year. They're handling some very good big cases coming through, and we're looking forward to finalize those cases. I think the challenge for us is to make sure the completion of those cases, we move on, but the message must go out. Yes, we are very vigilant together with other enforcement agencies, making sure that those illegal practices are stopped. And the penalties as well are there as a deterrent factor, rather than just being there. Very minimal amount. People will just try and beat the system, knowing that the penalty is not sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking at the money that should actually be coming in, what are people being deprived of? I mean, I have this sort of money come into the economy and come in via taxes. What are some of the things that people are always complaining about poor infrastructure and things like that? What does this mean for them?
Sure, Rita, that's a very basic part of it. Given that FRCA collects about 90% of total government revenue. So it's important that people must know that the money we've collected goes to government in order for government to do its social obligations to the community at large. Hospitals, the roads, the bridges. A lot of money has been set aside for infrastructure this year, which is good. And of course, if the tax collection is weak, then government cannot do much. So it's an obligation, by and large, the companies, all taxpayers, individuals, that we must pay the right amount of tax. If we want good schools for our children, if we want better health system for people in the community, then of course pay the right amount. Without that, then government cannot do much to provide those services.
Thank you. You're listening to Speak Your Mind, and we have Mr. Tikolevu and Mr. Buksh talking to us about the provisions of the unexplained wealth, these new provisions that are now in effect. If you have any questions for either of the gentlemen, you can email us on goldfm@fbc.com.fj, on Facebook, Gold FM Fiji. You can also call us on 3220906 or 3220907. And maybe there's some questions that you might have, or some queries that you might have about these new provisions. We have the gentleman here ready to take your questions, and we're hoping that this would be able to clarify a lot of things concerning this new legislation. Now, Mr. Buksh, there's some people who would have accumulated wealth legitimately may be concerned that they could be victimized through the provisions of the decree. Can you talk about this? What assurance is there that there won't be situations like this?
Thank you. Whenever an application will be made before the court needs to be fully satisfied that the application includes only the unexplained portion. And the person will be asked to explain to the court that the wealth that is subject to the application was acquired lawfully for him to retain and keep it. If he provides unsatisfactory explanation on the lawfulness of the wealth that is subject to the application, then I'm afraid the court will make an order in favor of the application to forfeit the assets to the state. So the protection is always there, that the person's ability to explain the legality and lawfulness of the wealth that he or she may have acquired, or the business may have acquired. And when making a declaration, the court will have due regard to the lawfully acquired wealth. So it is provided for in the amended decree, and it is very much intact, and a person will not be subject or unduly subject to forfeiture of those assets that he or she or the business may have legally acquired.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you able to, just going back to the decree, talk about some of the crimes that are involved in it?
Yeah, the whole objective of the anti-money laundering framework that we have in Fiji is to take away the profit and the benefit away from the crime. So it's depriving the enjoyment of the ill-gotten wealth by the criminal. So that's the whole objective. And there are numerous criminal activities that link to proceeds or generate proceeds. And our crimes decree, including the bribery promulgation, includes a number of those offenses, and these include human trafficking, people trafficking, bribery, corruption, forgery, prostitution, including tax crimes, fraud, deception, fraudulent conversion, computer and cyber crimes, theft, larceny, embezzlement, and the like offenses, including currency smuggling. So we have a very comprehensive framework that looks at the broad elements of offenses in Fiji, including exchange control offenses or offenses under any other law that may generate some criminal wealth. It's all covered under the Proceeds of Crime Act and under Fiji's anti-money laundering framework. If I may also add, thousands of financial transactions flow through our financial system on a daily basis. And if you add that, it's probably millions of financial transactions flowing in and out through our financial system on an annual basis. And when we assign and allocate a dollar value, it's probably a few $billion annually. The difficult task is to identify and trace those transactions that we suspect are not clean transactions, and that is the most difficult bit. And therefore, we would always encourage and want the private sector financial institutions to come on board, not to say that this particular transaction is linked to this particular crime, but to say this transaction is suspicious, and therefore we are reporting to the Financial Intelligence Unit. Upon our investigation, we will say that, okay, this transaction was a tax evasion case, or this transaction was a cyber crime case, or some other criminal activity.
Okay. You're on Speak Your Mind, and if you do have any questions for either Mr. Tikolevu or Mr. Buksh, you can email them to goldfm@fbc.com.fj, or on Facebook, we're Gold FM Fiji, and you can also call us on 3220-906 or 3220-907. And we'll take a short break, and then we will come back and continue with these discussions. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind on Gold FM. I'm Rita Narayan, and as mentioned earlier on, we have Mr. Tikolevu from FRCA and Mr. Razim Buksh from the Financial Intelligence Unit, and we're talking about provisions of in law of the unexplained wealth and the powers that have been delegated to the different agencies to be able to tackle this whole issue of organized crime and tax evasion. Mr. Buksh, are there any other countries that have similar laws to this?
Yeah, there are a lot of countries that are moving away from the traditional conviction-based forfeiture of criminal assets towards a civil non-conviction-based forfeiture, which Fiji had in the 2005 amendment of the Proceeds of Crime Act. And now Fiji has opted to go even take a further step where conviction is not required, where the person has to come before the court and explain the lawfulness to retain the wealth. Australia has some very good provisions in relation to unexplained wealth, and I think Western Australia had some successful cases in relation to unexplained wealth declarations and order. I think the statistics show that around 20 successful cases over the past 5-10 years, as well as we have Ireland and Colombia that our research shows that they have similar provisions. But going back slightly, when the bribery promulgation was done in Fiji, it included a provision on illicit enrichment, where public servants who were suspected to accumulate wealth beyond their lawful salary or emolument were subject to a criminal offense. And if they were unable to explain the lawfulness, similar to the one that we have, but this was only limited to public servants, it would constitute a criminal offense, and with a penalty of $1 million or 10 years imprisonment, or they would be required to pay to the state the portion of the unexplained wealth. Many countries are going away with a conviction-based forfeiture, because it is very difficult to get a successful conviction on serious crimes. So money laundering itself is a difficult crime to prove. Mm-hmm. So where you are unable to get a conviction, then it was very difficult to get a hold of the criminal assets. So this particular decree on unexplained wealth is very modern. It meets our objectives that now we can go for the unexplained wealth of individuals and businesses.
Mm-hmm. And what about in terms of compliance with international standards, and as far as Fiji is concerned?
Fiji is generally compliant with most of international requirements, either on money laundering or tax or corruption. Fiji has actually ratified the Vienna Convention on illicit trafficking in narcotic drugs and other related organized crimes. And we all know that Fiji was one of the first countries in the Pacific Island states that ratified the UN Convention against Corruption. So we are pretty much compliant, but ratifying and implementing is one thing, and successfully implementing is the other. So now we seeing the tangible results of the implementation work that we have done, and continuously enhancing and upgrading our laws to include modern provisions such as this.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Buksh, what happens to the assets if they do end up in the hands of the state, in a case where it's been successfully dealt with?
The Proceeds of Crime Act provides for a comprehensive mechanism how we deal with assets that are restrained by the court, how assets are confiscated and forfeited to the state. We have some very good provisions on the establishment and the operation of a fund called the Forfeited Asset Fund, which is jointly managed by the Minister for Justice and the Minister for Finance. And it allows and provides for numerous provisions for the use of the funds. And one use of the fund that is deposited by way of forfeiture or restrained assets can be used for further enhancement and improvement of law enforcement measures. Includes providing equipments such as surveillance equipments and training to relevant officials of the various agencies that we discussed earlier in the program.
Okay, thank you. You're on Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, and we are here in the studio with Mr. Jitoko Tikolevu and Mr. Razim Buksh. And if you do have any questions or clarifications on the new laws, these new provisions in the law that give powers to relevant authorities to tackle organized crime and tax evasion, you can contact us on goldfm@fbc.com.fj. Just flick us an email, or you can find us on Gold FM Fiji on Facebook, or you can also call in on 3220-906 or 3220-907. Now, Mr. Buksh, there might be some people who are concerned about, because there's also an ability to report suspected cases, and some people might do it out of vindictiveness. How would this be addressed? Complaining about somebody else who's suddenly become so rich, and just doing it out of vindictiveness.
Yeah, firstly, we have a formal reporting mechanism where financial institutions are mandated by the Financial Transactions Reporting Act to report to the FIU cases of suspicion or unusual transactions being conducted by the account holders or customers or clients. And this includes not just commercial banks. A customer may be doing transactions that are questionable, unreasonable, or unusual or suspicious within the lawyer's trust accounts, or through the accountants, or through the real estate agents, or through the foreign exchange dealer. So the law allows the reporting institutions to provide that information to us. So that's a legal right way. And last year we had, in 2012, 5 successful money laundering cases. And I'm very pleased to say that the informants were all financial institutions for this particular 5 money laundering cases, including the cybercrime internet banking fraud case, which is reported by a financial institution. And on the other side, we have the members of the public who make disclosures and report to the relevant agencies. And not all would be good, credible information. Some would be, as you have correctly said, would not be correct in terms of the disclosures. But for the FIU, we are mandated to look at each and every information that is reported to us, and then we make the decision whether the case needs to progress into formal investigation or not. So we will obviously look at the merit of the matter and the information provided, and through our networking and through our intelligence development program, we will come to a conclusion that yes, this case has some merit because of this particular additional information that we have collected, and we will be able to share that with the relevant enforcement agencies. And those that don't meet our benchmarks and our controls, then those, of course, will be filed away.
Okay, thank you. You're on Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, and we have Mr. Razim Buksh of the Financial Intelligence Unit and Mr. Jitoko Tikolevu, Chief Executive of the Fiji Revenue and Customs Authority. And if you do have any questions or any queries about these new laws, send us an email on goldfm@fbc.com.fj, or on Facebook. You can find us on Gold FM Fiji, or you can also call us on 3220-906, 3220-907. And we will now take a short break, and we will be back for more discussions. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. I'm Rita Narayan, and once again, our guests in studio, Mr. Tikolevu, FRCA Chief Executive, and Mr. Razim Buksh, Director of Financial Intelligence Unit. Now, Mr. Tikolevu, if we could just ask you, why is it important for people to pay the right amount of taxes?
Yeah, as I've said earlier, people should understand, people of Fiji should understand what tax money being collected by government, what it will do for you. It's unfair for someone who is paying the right amount of tax, lodging the return at the right time, and somebody is not doing the right thing in terms of lodgement returns and paying the right amount. So if all of us are doing the right thing, we should not be worried about what government will provide. I'm sure everything that we need in terms of our needs, the water, the power, the roads, the schools, the medical facilities, will all be there. I think the issue really is for us to know that if we continue to do the wrong thing, we continue to evade taxes, then those services, which actually are basic needs for our children as well as us today and in the future, will not be there, sustainable future for our children. So the fundamental issue that it's important for us all to know that everything comes from paying the right amount, do the right thing. The lodgement and the payment of correct tax, and you're doing the right thing. It's an obligation for everyone that everyone do the right thing. And of course, we have our own. Just add on what has been stated earlier. In terms of what we have at FRCA, we have our whistleblowing policy that protects informers. If you know someone that continue to do the right, to the wrong thing, then you are protected in terms of informing us who are these people. The wealth that have been accumulated without the valid reasons, done wrongly in terms of evasion and fraud. And we will be very keen. Our ears are always listening to all these informers that are coming through. But of course, there's a balancing act. There is a process that we normally go through, verifying all this information to make sure that they are correct. There's always an independent team that listens and collects all this information before we decide to take a step further in terms of investigation. So we are always encouraging informers to do that because of the need to continue to do the right thing.
Okay. And what is the assurance that you have for the informants when they provide these information to the agency?
They will be protected under the policy we have. But if the report comes through is correct, there is also a thank you in terms of the prize that will be given to the successful detection and completion of cases and someone is being taken to task. So this is also part of the policy. Looking at $10,000 to $20,000 depending on the result of the investigation/audit.
Mm-hmm. Now, gentlemen, before we wrap up, just once again, what is the whole intention of these new provisions?
If I may, Yes, we want to ensure that our financial system is safe, secure, and protected from criminal transactions that are tainted with criminal proceeds. And equally important is the protection of our citizens from falling victims of crimes. And we don't want criminal syndicates operating businesses here in Fiji. We don't want the operation of large-scale drug cases or trafficking cases. So there's a huge element of interest by all of us to ensure that these objectives are successfully attained. And in doing that, I think we need to join hands with the private sector, with the public as well. And therefore, the call has been made by all the agencies, relevant agencies, including the police, the revenue and customs, and the FIU, that the informant should come forward and inform us of any suspicion or unusual cases that they think would be relevant to investigation by the authorities. Also equally important for us is to be seen to be compliant with international standards, and I think Fiji has progressed very well, and we are seen to be compliant with both the anti-corruption and anti-money laundering provisions here in Fiji, and we have taken numerous steps. And modernizing our laws has been one of the very important objectives of the government, and that is why we have seen that a number of laws has been introduced to ensure that we meet those international objectives, as well as we have provisions domestically that allows our agencies and authorities to handle complex crimes and to take away the profit from the criminals. So my humble plea to the listeners and viewers as well is to ensure that if they have information, they report to the relevant agencies. And as my colleague has already mentioned, the informants will be protected. And for the Financial Intelligence Unit, they will be legally protected as well.
Okay. And Mr. Tikolevu, as far as FRCA is concerned?
Yeah, as I said, those reports that comes through relating to cases that cases are illegal in terms of lodging of returns and payment of tax, we're always keen to listen to those. Informers are very much protected in terms of confidentiality. That's very much part of our policy anyway, and the investigation team is task is to ensure that those confidentiality is remained.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We've now come to the end of this program. Thank you for your time, and we hope to be able to speak to you again sometime in the future concerning the provisions of this new legislation concerning unexplained wealth. That's all we have for today. You can join me again next week. I'm Rita Narayan. Wadamanda.